You've got this momentum upward as you age from being a young child, and then at a certain point you hit your peak, and then it's a slow decline. And then if you have
Right.
something like chemo, that's a rapid decline. And guess what? You continue the slow decline from that depressed point. So what I'm telling
Mhm.
you as a 70-year-old is I can actually get you back on the incline at 70 years old. Um, and that's just not something enough people are aware of. And I hope that we can spread that message clearly so people understand, you may feel like shit. You may feel like things are getting worse and there's no hope in sight. But back to the point of optimism, there's reason to
Right.
be optimistic because there are solutions. All right, today's guest is Dr. Joey Carter. Joey is an online client of Michael Jones, whom you've seen on the podcast if you follow the show. We'll have Bree link to his episode in case you want to see who he is before you listen to one of his clients. So Joey is out of Alabama, from Mississippi originally. You're a double doctor, Joey.
Correct. That's
Yep,
right.
yep. And you've got a doctorate in veterinary medicine and a doctorate in medicine, and you're an orthopedist. Is that all right?
That's correct. Sure is.
Okay, so let's start off by talking about how lifting heavy weights destroys your joints. Okay, tell me more about that.
um, well, there certainly is a lot of talk about that in the past. I think as the literature has come around, initially it was talking about running and marathons and that type of uh, in quote injury to your joints because of the pounding that was done. And I think the literature has started to show us that that's not the case, that the joints really do well with exercise and weight bearing activity. Um, when it comes to uh, compressing cartilage and putting weight loads on cartilage itself, it does help that cartilage as far as it responds to that and helps actually make it stronger and more vibrant. You can certainly have traumatic injuries. Somebody is playing a sport and injures an ACL, and you have a sudden impact on that cartilage, you can actually damage and kill that cartilage and lose and knock the cartilage off the end of the bone. And those traumatic type injuries are much different than a controlled weightlifting environment like we would be doing with starting strength.
Yeah, Ripito says this all the time. The stress recovery adaptation process does not just apply to your muscle mass; it applies to your entire human machine. And your entire human machine is regenerative. And when you're getting stronger, you're also producing denser bones, stronger connective tissue. You're improving the capability of your cartilage, the padding between your joints. The whole system responds to the stress, not just the muscle mass. So that sounds like that's your point of view as well.
It is 100%. I spend a lot of time educating my patients because a lot of my patients at this time in my career are over 50. And especially when it comes to bone density and being an orthopedist, that you see the cause and effect of not having that bone strong enough to support you, and or when you have an injury, for example, walking your dog and the leash wraps around your legs and you hit the ground, and all of a sudden you've got a hip fracture that's going to change your life for the next 3 to 6 months. And if you're over 65, you're going to have a 25 to 30% mortality rate in the first year after having a hip fracture.
Yeah.
So it's not a small thing. And the older you get and things like that happen, that mortality rate can go up. And the possibility that you're back in the hospital within a year is approaching 50%. So in my part of the medical profession, that's a daily talk, an every appointment talk with anybody that's in that age group about things we can do medically to keep things stronger. We obviously, in our day and age, everybody wants a pill, everybody wants a shot, everybody wants the easy way out. And that's not always the best. That's not the best way. The best
Easy
way,
doesn't work.
easy has never worked in my life. And that video that Michael sent of me, doing a bench press and struggling all the way up with that weight to achieve that, that kind of sums my life up. And I think I'm much better for it.
Oh, so now you're a conspiracy theorist spreading misinformation. Doctor, don't you realize that heavy bench presses will destroy your shoulders? What the hell are you thinking, man?
Well, as Dr. Ripito so well put, when it comes to lifting that weight, you need to do it correctly, and you need to do it in the way that your joint is made to lift that weight.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think he has done such a good job. And his starting strength Bible is, in my mind, is just one of the best ways we have to understand how a lift can be performed and taken into account the soft tissue structures around it to allow those lifts to occur. Because the shoulder joint, it doesn't have a lot of bone restraint like your hip does, or your knee does, or your elbow does. It's not for example, it's not a two degree of motion, just flexion extension with the elbow.
Sure.
A
hinge joint.
That shoulder can go just about anywhere. And so there's a lot of soft tissue structure that supports it. And the way that you do that lift really makes a difference in how well you protect it, as well as enabling you to get stronger with an efficient lift.
Yeah. It's pretty strange. It'd be like, the bad rap that weightlifting has, the way people approach it is, they're like, okay, I need to improve my physical situation. I'm going to go subject my body to the stress of heavy weights without having any idea how to lift them carefully. And then if I get hurt, I'm going to go around on the internet saying that deadlifts are bad for you. I mean, it'd almost be like someone deciding they want to get into self-defense, so they purchase a gun and they go to the range and they're trying to clean the thing out and they point it at themselves, end up shooting themselves in the foot. They're like, oh, these guns are dangerous. It's like, well, they can be, but lots and lots of people use them safely every day. And when it comes to things that are bad for your joints, that's a pretty counterintuitive situation, because soccer is the most dangerous sport on earth in that sense. And weightlifting is on the opposite end of the spectrum, as counterintuitive as that might sound. So I see you shaking your head there, nodding rather. I'd love to hear your point of view as someone who's operating on these people.
Well, with weightlifting, you're in a very controlled environment. And so you have the opportunity to engage that weight and put it through a range of motion that you have learned is appropriate and where it needs to be. When you're on the soccer field, when you're on the flag football field, okay, you're in control of your movements, but you're not in control of the surface that you're on. You're not in control of the people that are coming at you, and you don't know which way that person's going, so that all of a sudden you're making a nanosecond direction change where you're moving at a different velocity with a different amount of stress applied to joints in a way that is not controlled. So now when you do weight lift and you've got more muscle mass and strength to control those joints and control where you're going, intuitively it's going to be a safer path to scoring a touchdown or scoring a goal. So that there's a lot of different levels, as are many things in life, when it comes to this as well as to sport in general. And I will have to say that I lifted weights for a number of years, thinking that my high school football coach knew and taught the way that we should do those things. However, when I'm saying that, at my age of getting ready to be 62, the weight room we had for our football team did not have a squat rack. Okay. It had a universal machine and it had free weights, and we could do presses and cleans, but we didn't have a coach to teach us. And our team won the state football championship several different years. And our track team, that I was on, we won state championship several years. So, in spite of those things, we were able to survive it. Could we have been much better as a result of it? Oh yeah. Now that, if only I knew then what I know now, I think it'd be nice.
Indeed, yeah, and you'd know better than to trust authority, especially at a government high school.
Well, I don't know how much they knew either,
Exactly.
when it,
Or how
uh,
much they were not aware of, and unaware of that fact too.
no,
Yeah,
that's right. You don't know what you
don't
don't
know
know.
what you don't know. Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, and in my field and with medicine and even when it comes to strength training, the better educated you are with the correct people educating you and what you need to know, the better chance you have at success and having good outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a bunch of interesting stuff in there I'd like to respond to. So, firstly, muscle as a protective mechanism is a concept that I never hear talked about, especially in the medical field, which is not surprising because, Doctor, you and I are both aware of the state of medicine in the United States and across the world as a result, since we lead the charge. But
Yeah.
just as a personal example, when I was young, I was in a sledding accident and I had some kind of back injury that I never had addressed in my low back, to the extent that I couldn't jump for several months, and I had a lot of pain walking and standing for a long time. And that issue plagued me for years and years and years and years. And the only thing that made it better, just basically gone. It does pop up here and there, but it's basically gone. Is adding a whole bunch of lean muscular body mass. And so that's at the base, that's at my tailbone, the base of my spine, and then my thoracic, my mid spine. I had this issue where apparently my cartilage connecting my rib cage to my spine is loose or weak. I don't know what that condition's called. Do you know offhand, by the way?
Um, there can be inflammation there, like costochondritis, where you
Okay.
have an inflammation around where the cartilage and bone come together, and you've got ligament and soft tissue around supporting and holding that together, and you can certainly get inflammation in that
Okay,
too.
that
Yeah.
might have been the issue then, and that probably was due to an autoimmune disease that I have, Crohn's, or at least somehow
Sure.
related systemic inflammation type stuff. But nonetheless, the result of that is whenever I would hit the deck, let's say I got swept in Muay Thai or I was thrown in Jiu-Jitsu or whatever, I'd hit the mats and my ribs would pop out, and it would, all the muscles in the area would guard, and it would just be excruciating, and I had to get a real aggressive chiropractic adjustment to get those things put back into place. And the thing
Right.
that fixed it, I mean, I'm going to spin around.
Yeah.
I've got
Oh
a
yeah.
big, wide back, a big, wide,
Absolutely.
muscular back. And just a
Right.
few weeks ago, I had a spill on my one wheel. And if Paul Horn's watching this, he's going to be cringing because the guy broke his shoulder on a one wheel and advises me not to ride one, which is wise, but I don't always make wise decisions. So, nonetheless, I got this new thing. I made an aggressive turn on a slick surface and I went
Yeah.
flying and
Hmm.
just crashed. And I was waiting to hear pop, 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 just, 3, 4 ribs come out. And I stand
Yeah.
up and dust myself off and I'm good to
Right.
go. My knee, I've had surgery on my right knee. I'm going to need surgery on my left knee. I've got another meniscus tear from jujitsu. Um, I've been able to get around fine. I was able to get around fine on the right one and just kind of delay the surgery because my knees are so strong. Same thing with my
Right.
left one. I've got severe issues in shoulders and elbows, and I'd hate to see an MRI of what my shoulder looks like, but I can tell you that I'm pretty certain the muscle mass is what's keeping the structure sort of in place and protected. That's my instinct
Right.
and my own experience. I would love to hear your opinion on that as a professional.
I think that the muscle strength and the volume that you've got around that joint, um, I think it has a protective effect because um, well, you can judge for your own self. When you're much thinner and your muscle mass was much less, when it came to range of motion, or you were pulling or tugging or wrestling with somebody, you probably had and could feel more joint pain and strain versus now when you've got that muscle mass around you and you pull something, you know what? It's solid.
Yeah.
You don't feel like everything's pulling or tearing apart. And
Right.
I think that muscle mass around it, that muscle protects the ligaments and the things, the structures around that joint. It helps keep where they're not strained so much because you're not that muscle is not allowing that joint to get in that position, and you're much better able to control it because of that. And as far as your back is concerned, you've also got somewhat of a cushion effect now when you hit the ground,
Yeah.
because you've got a layer of tissue there that's much thicker and can resorb, as opposed to it just hitting bone and um, causing a disruption at your rib junctions there. So
You just mentioned another point that's controversial and I think is probably asked backwards in pop culture's understanding of this stuff. So, a lot of people think that flexibility is some sort of a virtue. It's some sort of thing to be pursued. And what you've just said is that your muscle mass prevents your joints from getting into a hyperextended, dangerous position, which prevents injury, which has certainly been my experience. Is that accurate?
yeah, well, so I think to a certain degree, flexibility is genetic. All right, because certain people, and we all know them, that the kid that was in your class that could take their leg and put it behind their head, okay, or people that could do a split. Well, there's certain of us that that's never been the case, and um, and you can certainly stretch your muscles out to where you can somewhat achieve those things. To what advantage that is, certainly in fast twitch sports, you don't necessarily want that laxity there. You want to have a tight forced contraction there when you're um, sprinting or jumping or those type of things. And I think there's literature to show that a lot of stretching beforehand kind of it kind of loosens that end point up to where you get an overstretch at times when you are stressing a muscle like that. Um, I, you know, when it comes to stretching, I tend, from with the literature that I've read, I tend to do less stretching now than I would have in the past, and and that's even with doing jujitsu and that type of thing. Jujitsu stretches you out enough. The positions that you're in, you get enough stretching there. I don't have to necessarily pre-stretch to have that happen, especially at my age.
No, you're getting
So
assisted stretching from your rolling partner for sure. And
that's
every time
exactly
you
right.
warm up, doctor, you're stretching, right? Because I wonder what percentage of guys in their 60s can squat to depth as easily as you can, because you practice that range of motion and it's loaded,
Absolutely,
and it's loaded. You got to
absolutely.
control the range of motion, and you're getting some serious stretch effect in that situation.
That's something that that I certainly talk about in a daily appointments that I have with folks when it comes to stretching. That dynamic, active warm up is probably the best stretch that you can have, as opposed to just standing and passively stretching, as so many of us have done for so many in my generation have for so long. I'm and I give credit, learning and going through reading, listening to Mark and what he's had to say, and his 40 years of experience in doing it. And as I have come on over the last 6 or 7 years and began to understand more, it has certainly helped my practice in understanding where he's coming from for that, and then being in the starting strength program and trying to apply those things and see what happens with me as I progress through the novice and intermediate programs. It That's the way I like to learn, and that's the way that I enjoy learning, because I'm not only reading it and seeing what's out there, I'm also applying it And when it happens here, as Mark done through his career, you start knowing and understanding those foundational principles a lot better, I think.
That sets you apart from a lot of people in your field. You're still open minded. You're still curious. You're still willing to learn. You're willing to learn from people that don't have the endorsement of the state and don't have a traditional degree, because you're willing to examine their arguments based on their merits. And then you're willing to try things for yourself to determine if those arguments are actually true, which makes you an actual scientist as well as a doctor, which I applaud you for. But let me ask you this, doctor.
Okay.
On one hand, I'm impressed with Rip, and I'm pleased that he exists. He's benefited my life in a bunch of ways. We're now able to benefit thousands of people's lives in positive ways with the gyms. Why is it that a power lifter, strength coach, academic, I won't call him an academic, let's call him an intellectual, from Texas, from North Texas, is the guy that's come up with this stuff in 2023? And where's the medical field? Where's your industry in understanding this stuff and learning this stuff? And just one last kind of comment on this while you're thinking about how to respond to it. Sometimes I think to myself that at every stage of humanity's development, we're probably pretty proud of how far we've come, and we're probably pretty arrogant about how much we know. And I just kind of think about the days when there was bloodletting and voodoo and just all these other things that I'm sure we were quite confident about, and that was the approved narrative. That was conventional wisdom. Obviously, this is true. This is the way that it's done. And here we are with all this advanced technology, space travel, internet, everything else. And I don't know if we're that much further along. I don't know if we're as far along as we think we are, because this is basic, fundamental, how to optimize your human machine stuff, and our medical apparatus is clueless about it. So I would just love to hear your reaction to that.
Well, well, there's different levels to that question. I, from my perspective, and an IQ or intellectual basis, I don't think there's a lot of change in the last 10,000 years as far as man is concerned when it comes to IQ. All right. And you can go back and see in what's been built and done in the past with the things that different civilizations have been able to do. In the book of Solomon in the Bible, it talks a lot about how time does and how things change. But some things still always remain the same. And I feel that way about man's inhumanity to man, as well as the good that's out there too. You see that all across civilizations, and for people, and it's fairly arrogant to think that our civilization right now, when it comes to it and how a lot of people like to use the word advanced, it is advanced when it comes to technical know-how. And it is advanced as far as medicine goes with what we're able to do now and treat now. It certainly has really advanced a lot. Man was his own, we were our own problem when it comes to a lot of those advances, because we didn't have a lot of the tools to do those things. But you also have man's ego that says, I developed this and this is the way it is, and I don't necessarily want to change this way, because what I've done, I want everybody to be able to see and understand and know that I am the man. So, that's where man gets into a problem with thinking that I'm God, and man's always had that. And there's some of us that realize we're not God, and we believe in a, some people want to say intelligent design. Some of us are Christians. Some of us are in other faiths, realize there's something greater than me. And there is something that we connect into on a spiritual basis that's not of this world. It's also something out there different. And, for me, I'm a Christian and have been, and that perspective for me humbles me And it also helps me to understand that I am not God, and things that I do and develop, surely they've been developed before, and I'm not necessarily the creator or origin of that. There's a higher being that is.
Mm.
And so when it comes to looking at medicine and these advances and stuff that we do, man is his own block a lot of times to those advances. And I think some of that has something to do with it.
Sure.
But this is just me talking.
No, that's a fascinating perspective. The arrogance of man is drives quite a bit of progress and issues in our world. There's no doubt. Anyone that's under the delusion that there's not more to existence than what you can see and observe is just delusional. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. You know, and interesting. Yeah. We'll go off topic real quick here. I just thought you might find this interesting. I was talking to Grant Skelton, one of our copywriters for the gyms. He said, he's from Memphis. He goes, I was really surprised. He started interviewing the franchise owners for newsletter announcements. He goes, I was really surprised at how many of your franchise owners and how much of the community is driven by faith and are Christians. He's like, do you know why that is? And I was like, I was trying to think about it. I said, delayed gratification is my guess. I think these are people that are comfortable with delayed gratification. That's what I think. I'm willing to put in the work today for a benefit that they anticipate tomorrow.
I've watched a number of your podcasts, and just like I try to prepare for a surgical case that I'm going to do, or trying to understand a principle and a disease process to make sure that I can understand it enough to diagnose it and treat it. What you've said about how you wanted the company to develop and build, and the type people that you wanted in it. You wanted people that cared about other people and wanted to put other people first, and that you wanted people that wanted to work hard and be able to listen and have empathy, but at the same time be able to instruct people on what they do. Mm-hmm. A lot of those principles are certainly within the Christian faith. Yep. And I think it really applies to the type model that you're looking for.
You're right. You're right about that. So since moving to Idaho, we're going to go off on a big tangent here, Doctor. I hope you don't mind. Hopefully the audience doesn't lose us.
I'm fine with it. I'm good.
So I grew up in Southern California, where families are disintegrated.
Right.
Where degeneracy is increasing as time goes on, including crime and all this other stuff. Where the standard is being an atheist, and I was a religious Jew as a kid, and then I lost my faith, and because I never had it, I was just looking for the actual proof, and when I didn't find the proof, I left the religion, and then went to the other extreme because I was kind of disappointed, and I felt like I'd been sold a lie, kind of thing, right? And then moved here to Idaho, and I tend to look at results. What is the outcome I'm trying to achieve? And then how people get there or how I get there is kind of secondary. The objective is the main thing. So what I mean by that is, when I came out here, I just started meeting the most lovely, down-to-earth, friendly, loving, caring, kind people.
Right.
And they're all of faith. And it's not a coincidence. Like James Johnson, perfect example on the podcast. Andy Barman. There's a lot of Mormons around here. And so my more mature view, I think, and I just discussed this with JD Shipley, who his LLC, by the way, out of Houston, is called the Barbell Calling. Like, he believes this is his mission in life, to bring this to people. I was speaking to him yesterday on the phone, and I told him, because we'd had conversations about God before, and I basically just said, hey man, I believe in God now. And I said, I don't know what that means, though. I don't actually know what that means. And he basically agrees with me. I just said, after seeing my wife get pregnant and her develop this life inside her body and then give birth to my baby.
Absolutely.
It's just, for me, God is the thing that I don't understand, the thing that I cannot see. And that is separate from religion. But I do find it comforting and settling to just submit to the idea that I don't know what the fuck is going on. I have no
Hmm.
idea, but I'm open to the idea that there's a lot going on that I'm not aware of, and I'm just open minded at this point. And then that aside, as I mentioned, people that I find that have God in their lives are basically, God means optimism. That's kind of the way I've defined it. If you believe in God, you believe that things will be better in the future. And it's like, I want to be around optimistic people that have good
Hmm.
family values, that care about others. So, just for the pure utility, we may join a church. And I asked my Mormon buddy straight up. I was like, hey, if I don't buy the religious stuff in the stories, will you guys accept me? And he's like, yeah, I mean, that probably applies to most of us. so
Yeah.
so I've come to all different, one end of the spectrum to the other, to kind of right in the middle as I get older.
Well, I will, that's certainly a journey that I'm happy for you that you're starting on, because I can't really express to you the joy that it has given me in my life,
Nice.
and what it has added to me as a person, how it has taken the focus off of me and put it on other people,
Yep.
and be able to understand the things that and share what other people are going through. um, I will say that my faith helped me understand where I came from,
Mm.
where I'm going, and I have a rock to lean on, and knowing that what's coming ahead of me, that I can be prepared for, and that He will prepare me for that.
Yep.
Um, and that is where a lot of that stability can come from. The other part of it is that, um, you know, and it is a whole nother discussion. But I just know that being in the field that I'm in, where science is God, for a lot of people, I really felt that after two doctorates, in veterinary medicine and in medicine, and understanding and studying the whole process, not just on a just not on a phenotypic level, but on a molecular level. The smaller things get, the less randomization there is, and how many things have to come together to form an order that you and I could just sit here in front of a computer and talk intelligently to one another about ideas that are creative in your own mind that you haven't really thought that you were going to talk about today. And all of a sudden, you're going through a whole thought process on how that's going to occur. And you're going to come to conclusions about that are not random,
Yep.
and that man has come before. Uh, that's a lot to think that it evolved from a single cell
No
or
doubt.
two cells to get that. I don't think there's enough time on Earth or has occurred for all of that to take place mathematically. I know it doesn't for the human clotting cascade, as an example,
Yeah.
with the number of steps just to clot your blood, not in addition to every other scientific process, enzymatic process that's going on in your body. There's not enough time to get that randomized to succinct, and not just one time, but over and over again in a single organism in the billions of organisms that are on the planet.
Yep.
So, I there's a lot, there's a I would have to say that folks that don't believe in God, frankly, have more faith than I do.
If they're certain there is no God, that
That's
is an ideology. That's a religion. Yeah, I
yeah.
think certainty is a fallacy. And what you just articulated there is something an old Jewish scholar named Rambam kind of points out in a very simple way. He says, "Look, if you take a bunch of paint and throw it on the canvas, the chances of a perfect picture coming out are relatively low." And don't get me wrong, that's not a case is settled argument and unequivocal proof, but it does indicate the true probabilities of the situation that we're dealing with. So,
Well,
but
right.
yeah, this is a topic that's been on my mind. But I do want to get back to your profession, and I was curious, what is your take on Ripeto's volume versus intensity argument. So we started this podcast talking about running, and that
Right.
would be, you know, the highest volume, lowest intensity, as compared to you doing heavy singles or heavy triples, which is, you know, low volume, high intensity. Um,
Right.
can you tell me your experience and your education on that subject? What are the pros and cons of both, please?
Um, well, there's certainly a middle ground where exercise in general, and studies will show that exercise 45 minutes 5 days a week will increase your cardiovascular benefit, efficiency, and protective effect as far as having a heart attack. It also certainly that increase in blood flow helps with dementia better than just about any pill we've got that you can take. So that extra blood flow there makes a big difference as far as just your brain effect goes. But when you start expanding it out, um, you know, I it depends on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. I did an Ironman at age 52 in 2014, and that training process obviously involved a lot of miles and a lot of time, and and I enjoy the process. So there were certain benefits from that. At the same time, um, the way that my body responded to that is definitely differently than. And at that time, I'm 5'8". By the time I got ready to do that Ironman, which I trained for about a year, my weight was about 162. Um, and now I did the novice program. I've done it several times simply because I did jujitsu along with it and really never got out of the novice program because I couldn't recover enough to be able to do anything else. And I was satisfied with that because the fellow that I was training with weighed 240 pounds. And when you're 165 versus now at 185, 190, it it really helps out. And so I think you achieve a lot of effects from the lifting hormonally as well as the ability and how it changes your insulin resistance and some of those biomechanical or biochemical methods of helping with your health.
Yeah.
Um, I I would definitely say that in my profession, um, for example, I had two people that I did total joints on this past week. One fellow was 6'5" and 360. Another fellow was 6'1" and 300. You know, the Joey Carter that's 185 to 90 pounds that's been lifting compared to the Joey Carter that was riding a bike 100 miles on a weekend. Um, that process was made a lot easier and a lot more efficient by 30 pounds of muscle, 25 to 30 pounds of muscle mass. Um,
Let's
I
just let's
think
just stop
that
there for a sec. So I just want to confirm: heavier and stronger equals better cardio performance. Is that right?
um, it's not better. That would not be better Ironman performance
Sure.
unless I would
That's the
I
extreme
would
end of the spectrum. Yeah.
it's both extremes end of the spectrum, and you still can achieve both of those goals. Um, I there are when it comes to long term, long distance, um, high in the intensity training where that heart rate is up at a really high level for long periods of time. There's a tendency to build up some inflammation there,
Mm.
and I've had other physicians that have had um, some electrical problems as far as their heart goes and other things when you start training in that mode and that frame of mind for a long period of time.
Yep.
So, you know, but at the same time, when it comes to lifting, it's a there's more of an anaerobic process to it in those lifts. It's not the long, slow distance like you would get with long distance training. But at the same time, when it comes to doing short and intermediate activities just with the lifting, yeah, it helps out a lot.
Yep.
That's where you can, and it all depends on what you want to do. If there are things you need to have a little more cardio to go with it, then yeah, you can back off the, wanting to max lift and come up and add some aerobic conditioning to it. But at the same time, it all depends on the distance and how long you want to perform it.
Yep. I would love
I
to
know
see
that's
your.
a lot.
No,
but
that's helpful. Yeah. I want to see your before and after photos, by the way. Hopefully you can send those to Bree so we can throw them up on the screen. Because for the people listening to this and not watching it, Joey has a thick neck, thick shoulders, thick traps, thick chest. He's got his shirt buttoned down to the second button, not because he's Australian, but because he's got to fit his neck in that thing. So you look great, man. You've got a presence about you, and to have a presence like that in your 60s is pretty cool. So what was that like? How did that all go down? And I want to hear about your journey and your PRs and the whole nine.
Well, I was looking back in my training log, and in about 2015, I had decided that I wanted to get stronger, and so I looked and came online, and there was a process at that time that was 3 sets of 5 that I don't think that another company had started up, and I think got from Mark, and so I started that out, but that led me into seeing the Blue Book for the first time, and I got the Blue Book, and once I started reading that, I pretty much read it through cover to cover within a week and realized this is exactly what I've been trying to understand and what I wanted to know. And so then I just did the novice program myself, and I would run the novice program initially, and got to a point where I was lifting heavy enough that I couldn't really recover to work out 3 days a week. So I just stretched it out where I would work out really heavy 2 days a week. Of course, Michael Jones quickly, when he heard that, is like, well, you're not going to gain anything doing that. We've got to change what we're doing. And he's right.
Yeah.
But I didn't know then. And so, but then jiu-jitsu kind of came in to being. And so I really did jiu-jitsu 2 to 3 days a week for about 3 to 4 years. And it really supplemented, and I know that jiu-jitsu is for the little guy and he can beat the big guy, but I'm going to tell you, the big guy with jiu-jitsu is going to have a better opportunity beating a big guy with jiu-jitsu than a small guy.
That's right.
And, it's just the way it is. And so it really helped out a lot, and I enjoyed jiu-jitsu a lot more when I had gained an additional 20 pounds. And I hit the ground a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And that, because my partner and I did a lot of throws, and he knew the person who had trained him did a lot of judo. So we did some judo throws and stuff. And, when you're in your late 50s, that's not quite, you don't bounce quite as much as you did when you were 20. So it all helped out. But eventually, with jiu-jitsu, I transitioned. The person I worked out with a lot couldn't do it anymore, and so I went and joined a gym, and it's a real young bunch of guys that are hardcore getting after it, and they are performing really well on the national scene when it comes to jiu-jitsu. And when you have 10 grandchildren and you're 60, and you're also trying to run a full-time orthopedic practice, you don't need to get hurt.
No.
And and so in this group, I found that I was starting to treat injuries there that were more than I knew I needed to have. And if I continue with this group, because you never want to be the guy that's slowing everybody down.
Yeah.
You want to be the one that's helping push everybody.
Uh-huh.
So that particular gym was just, it wasn't the right place for somebody at my age and time. So I pulled out of that and then started pursuing started straight the novice program and got to the end of it. And then Michael Jones put an ad, put it on the website that he was doing a conference seminar in Mobile, Alabama, which is right close to where we were. And I went and met Michael, and we went through that camp, and then I signed on with him, and we started the process of transitioning me from being a novice to an intermediate. And we had to go through 2 different programs before we've gotten on to the one now that really is kind of sinking in and is helping me grow with that. And been real pleased with it and with Michael and how he's helped me and helped me keep the form creep out of what the lifts that I do.
You're smarter than I am. So my jiu-jitsu story is at 19 I got my shoulder injured. I was in a Kimura, so in the gi you can't really tell how thick someone is, right? I was 6'2", so they put me with these athletic monsters, and this guy about ripped my damn arm off. And even today I've got a shoulder height discrepancy because of that injury, and my range of motion reaching back behind me is limited. So I stayed out of jiu-jitsu for years and years and years, got a bunch stronger, hurt my neck in jiu-jitsu, and that was just pure bullheadedness. I had my neck in a bad position, but it was so strong I wasn't worried about it. But it also had a previous injury, so I got a neck crank and then had to get surgery to get that fixed up. And then just a few weeks back, I'm easing my way back in. I was doing a private down here in my basement with one of the instructors from the local gym, and man, I got my he turned my leg just a little bit to get me to roll. It wasn't a submission, but my knee was already so compromised that it popped out of place and tore my meniscus, and I've got a bucket handle tear, and the thing gets caught at the bottom. Just the same injury I had on the right knee from Muay Thai. So now, I didn't do what you did, and I didn't approach that correctly, and I've got another orthopedic injury. I'm going to have another surgery here. And man, I applaud you for doing what you're doing and doing it intelligently, because I'm 38 and I'm retired. I'm now done with martial arts because I can't afford to get hurt anymore, and I'm just not wise enough to pull in the reins when they need to be pulled in.
I understand it, because jiu-jitsu, there's nothing like it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it and love rolling and training. And the good thing for me is that I've got 5 young grandsons that they're still small enough that I can get in and wrestle with and play with and put some form and have a chance to teach them things too, as well as just having a good time. So until they get to be too big, I'm going to be fine.
Hell yeah. Awesome. If Brent Carter's listening to this, by the way, he's just thinking to himself, Ray, I told you so, man. Years ago, I told you. Doctor, can you fill us in on your PRs? What numbers have you hit on your lifts?
I'll just preface that by saying I had, and this will be good too. I had a inguinal hernia that I had repaired the last week of December. And I thought, well, that's just going to put me back a pretty good bit. As it turned out, in talking with the general surgeon that did it, he's like, Joey, you can start back and you just progress as you see fit, for better or worse. But if it's hurt, you just got to back off. Well, I had that surgery I was back lifting within 12 days to 2 weeks. I started out light, but then progressed right on back up. That by 4 weeks to 5 weeks, I was pretty much back 4 weeks, I was back where I was before I had the surgery. And because that mesh just comes in and gets in there and protects it, and you can push against it, but it's on that inside wall, and it actually help seat it better. And I really didn't have, that came around quicker than I expected. I also recently had some type of respiratory slash, RSV or COVID, where I had a lot of coughing going on, and actually pulled a muscle in my back from coughing. And I thought, well, if I'm going to injure my back, it's going to be from deadlifts. But it wasn't that at all. And that I got a radiculitis, which is inflammation of the nerve at S1. It goes all the way down to the back of my foot. And I'm like, bad enough that I could not squat, could not deadlift, and really couldn't do anything for about 2 to 3 weeks. And so we just waited it out, and then started what I could do, I did do. Mm-hmm. And then started out just squatting 3/4 squat, and then gradually was able to bring that on down. And so it's been, and I've never had anything really like that in the past. I've never really had any back problems per se. And that being said, now I'm back to working out. Squat wise, I think today I'm supposed to do 3 sets of 5 of 205 or something like that. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to PRs, recently I pressed, I military pressed 160. The last time that I did a regular press like we do in the book, it'd be about 170.
Nice.
Bench press, I'm at, I did a 2-second pulse press day before yesterday that was 250.
Nice.
I've done 270s, the most that I've bench pressed.
Yeah.
Deadlift wise, that squat wise, I think it's been about 4 months since I did that. It's I think I'm at about 335, something like that, at that time. Mm-hmm. And then deadlift was 365. So, and I'm anticipating those going up.
Well, there you have it, friends. You've just gotten a doctor endorsement and an orthopedist endorsement at that, of lifting heavy weights in your 60s, bench in mid 2s, deadlift in mid 3s. Hell yeah, that kicks ass.
We're working at, I really like the program we're doing now, and I'm enjoying it, and I look forward to it. I know it's doing something good for me. It certainly helped, and this is another point that you hear Mark talk about, and that is, don't coach your spouse. Well, of course.
Rips right again.
My wife comes up, and we've got all these grandkids, and she's toting them everywhere. And, she'll go out, she rides her bike 25 miles, a fat tire bike, 25 miles, 3 or 4 days a week. I mean, Michelle likes to stay in shape, but her back was giving her trouble. And I'm like, honey, my back's, every time I would do a whole lot of heavy stuff, my back would bother me a little bit. I said, but since I've been lifting, I hadn't had any trouble. I was like, let's get you out here and let's get your back strong, and let's just see what happens. And she went out and lifted basic lifts and did it for about 4 months before she said, I'm good. Mm. Well, in that time, her back pain went away.
What do you know?
And she did not have any more back pain, and still toting and pulling the kids around. And she looked at me and she goes, this is a lot easier. Yeah. And so I will say, every day in my practice, I am doing my best to push people, and it doesn't matter what age. For a lot of my 70 and 80-year-old ladies, I just simply have them squatting out of a chair.
Yeah.
You get home, she's not going to go to the gym. She's not going to go somewhere else. She's going to do what she can at home. Mm-hmm. Well, I talk about how important it is to have strength so you don't fall, so that you keep your balance, so that you can do your activities of daily living. And what I see in my practice,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I see is that it carries over. What you do in your 70s carries over into your 80s. And the folks that I have in my practice that are independent, and I'm saying they're independent, they're living at home by themselves, taking care of what they do. The majority, a lot of those folks had some form of exercise that they performed during their previous decades, and they're still very active.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it just makes a big difference. And the sooner you start that, the better chance you have of keeping that muscle mass through those later decades. And therefore, your better opportunity to be independent in your household without needing your kids or grandkids or other folks assisting you in what you do. And in my boomer generation, it's a very independent generation. They want to do things for themselves. They don't want anybody coming in and having to do something for them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the best ways I can help them do that. And in addition to, you know, long-term reconstructive things like total hips and total knees, which helps keep them independent because they're able to perform their activities of daily living so much easier.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so that's something that occurs every day in this practice. And I encourage people that are going to do total joints, get in the gym. You know, if you can't make yourself socially go into the gym, then get an exercise bike, get something, and get active and moving beforehand, because the stronger you are before you have that joint replacement, the quicker you're going to be able to recover and get back to doing the things you want to do.
yep. Little prehab, true prehab, right?
True prehab
Yeah.
is just really critical for whatever it is that you're going to get done.
That's been my experience surgically as well. Yeah, I see why you get along with Michael Jones so well. You're both doing, I guess we could call it God's work. You know, you both thrive on helping other people and living and performing your duties in service of others, which is a beautiful thing. So I wanted to mention to you one quick anecdote along those lines, and then I had one final question for you. My nanny is 70, and she's a cancer survivor. So she looks after our
Yeah.
4-month-old daughter, and our daughter's
Yeah.
15 pounds now.
Mm-hmm.
So the 7-year-old gal who went through chemo, which is, you know, the most catabolic thing you could do, just
Absolutely.
destroys muscle mass, destroys bone density. The poor girl could hardly see or hear after she was done.
Mm-hmm.
She's wobbly, man, you know, and she's a lovely lady who I want to have a long, healthy life regardless. And then selfishly, she's caring for my daughter. I don't want her to fall and drop my daughter, you know? So,
No.
you know, as well
Right.
as I do, that you can't push things on people. So I just simply let her know what we do. And I showed her a video, and she was terrified. She was afraid she was going to embarrass herself, but she came down to the gym, and she's been doing it a month now. And she says, I can go up and down the stairs without holding onto the handrail. And
Brad, that's such a win.
yeah,
That is such a win, and that's something that I that you know that brings joy for me, because when you can have people that you care about and know be able to do those type of things, because she said exactly right. She's afraid.
yeah,
She's got fear, and you're helping alleviate that fear through what you're doing. And you know, I consider that part of the calling that God's given me. And you know, when you do things and reach out to people like that, that's where caring and love come into play. And if there is a cure for what ails our country right now, it and the world for that matter, um, you know, love love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
yep. And if you're not a
And
religious person, let me translate that to just emanate love and optimism and positivity. Because what's the alternative? Fuck, you know. Um,
exactly.
and then, you know, learn how to give love, learn how to receive love, and that cures a lot of psychological issues, and that would solve a lot of societal issues too, wouldn't it? Um,
Yes, sir.
so doctor, I'm going to do a case study on her. Her name's Lucy. So you'll see that coming out on the YouTube channel here in a few months. Because she
That's
thanked
great.
me. I mean, she was getting emotional, and she thanked me. I said, hey, I appreciate that, but give me a few
Uh,
months. I'm going to change your life.
it's that's right.
Yeah.
You're opening her world back up.
Yeah.
It try to tell people that's what I'm trying to help you do is go from that world that's gotten really small to a world that's much bigger because you can do so many other things because of whatever it is we've done to try to help you get stronger and agile and able to do those things.
And just one last point on that, the way I articulated to her during our interview was I said, look, you've got this momentum upward as you age from being a young child. And then at a certain point, you hit your peak, and then it's a slow decline. And then if you have
Right.
something like chemo, that's a rapid decline. And guess what? You continue the slow decline from that depressed point. So what I'm telling you as a 70-year-old is I can actually get you back on the incline at 70 years old. And that's just not something enough people are aware of. And I hope that we can spread that message clearly so people understand, you may feel like shit. You may feel like things are getting worse and there's no hope in sight. But back to the point of optimism, there's reason to
Right.
be optimistic because there are solutions. And actually, that's a good segue into the last question that I had for you because I want to respect your time. Um,
Yeah.
so give our audience your practical experience and your theoretical understanding of how to repair or improve soft tissue with a non-surgical intervention. And specifically what I'm referring to are things like, so let's say the collagen synthesis effects of testosterone, maybe testosterone analogs like Anavar, maybe things like DECA, BPC 157, a popular peptide that's being used, stem cells, placental stem cells and things, platelet-rich plasma. What can you demystify some of this stuff for us? Can you tell us what's hype and nonsense and what's worth paying attention to? What's your clinical point of view?
Well, so there was a recent in the American Academy of Orthopedics, stem cell research and PRP, for example, have really been in the literature a lot. And so when a lot of these new things come out, um, the use of them in the last 25 years that I've seen, the use of them usually is ahead of the research coming in behind it. And as the research catches up, and obviously we're talking about peer-reviewed research that um, um, is good quality studies. Um, at this point, when it comes to specifically um, uh, PRP and stem cell, um, I think there are some areas that it can make improvement. Have we seen the dramatic, life altering changes with it, so to speak? No. Um, when it comes to chronic tendonitis and tendinopathies and things like that, intuitively it makes sense, and there is some low level evidence that suggests that PRP and those kind of things can help those type situations. Example, chronic patellar tendonitis, or insertion, or Achilles tendinosis within the tendon itself. But when it comes to saying that it's going to be able to do um, um, a lot, we're still not there as far as specifically saying it'll help this every time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's going to help a percentage of the time, but what you've got to compare it to, is it going to help this compared to another treatment that you might use?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that's catching up, and I think there, as the years go on, there's, in the next few years, we're going to have more that says, yes, you ought to use PRP to do this,
Mm.
or you ought to use stem cells to do that. But there's just stem cells, there's just a lot there when
Mm.
it comes to that. that cell and getting it in the studies that put it in a narrow enough spectrum to be able to say it's making the difference you want it to make here. There's still a lot of work to be done. Okay,
Yep.
so that's we use PRP in our practice for those specific things and in some other ways too. But at the same time, you wait on that peer-reviewed, randomized, double-blind control study, which are not cheap to do, but you sure like to see those studies coming in saying, oh yeah, we've got this and here it is.
Yep.
Those kind of studies really make the difference. I wish case reports were, at times, because you can certainly get great case reports with a lot of these things. But there's still a lot of work to do in defining exactly where those products are going to be best used.
Yep.
And so, and we'll see.
Yep.
But we're all very hopeful, and we see a lot of potential there. It's just getting a hold, in my mind, getting a hold of what it's going to be the best for, and is going to be reproducible when you do it, because it's not cheap, and your insurance company's not going to pay for it at this time, and and the way things are now, they may not.
Yep.
So when you're wanting to give good value to what you're trying to do, you want to be able to have this behind you to say, this is what we're able to do.
Yep.
So I think that's probably the best way I could put that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You're in the business of doing things that are proven and repeatable, and you're not exactly there to experiment on people. So you need a high standard of evidence before you can start implementing things in your practice.
Well, and so, and if it's part of a research study, then that's what that is about.
Sure.
And, and at my level as a general orthopedist in a medium-sized town or area, that's what I do. Is I just wait and watch. And we have people that come in quite frequently. Well, I want this. Well, yeah, we can do that, but let's discuss the risks, the benefits, what we do know. And if that's something that you still want to proceed with, well, you're going to have an informed consent to know that we're going to do it. And if we get really good results, well, we take note of that.
That sounds awfully reasonable. I'm not used to that. It's awfully reasonable.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, Doctor, this has been a great conversation. I could easily go another hour. There's so many other things I want to talk to you about. Let's get some feedback from the audience, and then if you had a good time and they want more, we'll schedule round two.
okay.
What if people want to get in touch with you, or are you in social media? Do you want to get contacted? Feel free to plug anything if you'd like to.
Well, I'm not necessarily somebody who's just wanting to be out there front and center when it comes to those type of things. I can, I guess I would just kind of leave it at that. I'm on Instagram, but I don't have that many followers on it. Social media. I'm still a boomer in that sense. I do have an Instagram account. You can ask my kids.
You're not an attention-seeking millennial, huh?
No, I'm not.
All right, everyone. So just leave Dr. Carter alone. All right.
No, it's not that either. And I have an Instagram account and a Facebook account, but they're not. It's when it comes to being a physician and being on social media like that, in my mind, you have to be real careful.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to the things that you're talking about, you want to make sure if you just talking about certain things off the cuff, people will fly with that, and will, and I wish common sense was always common.
Yep.
Um, and so you don't, the last, I was taught in veterinary school from the beginning, above all else, do no harm.
Yep.
And so that's something that has been a mantra through. And the things I want to do, I want my best to be positive and to have, the best outcome we can have in spite of the place where you start.
Yeah.
And so in that case, I'm a person who, if I'm going to talk to you and discuss and give advice, I want you to know me and where I come from, how I think about things. And if you don't know me, some of the things that I might say, you're not understanding it like I would want to be understood. At the same time, when I'm talking to you, I've got to understand you and what level we need to talk about these things that you can understand and apply. Because if I talk up here, well, what good is that?
Sure.
And then it leaves a whole lot of questions. And I'm here to try my best to answer your questions. And if I don't know, I want to find somebody that can explain it to you in a way that is usable and you can understand it.
In the age of performing, sex change operations on children and giving puberty blockers and things, the first do no harm deal I thought was out the window. But let's actually just leave it at that, because I see you shaking your head, and I think we'll go on a whole nother tangent. But Doctor, I'm glad you do what you do. And just lastly, for anyone in Alabama, what's the name of your practice in case they want to come see you?
It's Gulf Orthopedics, and we're in Fairhope, Alabama. We've got we're basically in the Mobile and Baldwin County areas and around that, which is on the southern tip, near or close to Gulf Shores, Alabama, is a place that a lot of people will know because of the beaches. We're down in that part of Alabama, and it's actually, Baldwin County is one of the fastest growing counties in the country right now.
I believe it.
And has been for the last few years.
People are trying to find some sanity and some lower population density,
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, well, a lot of folks from up north are coming and finding out that the South's a pretty good place to be.
Good salt of the earth people, man. Some good food too. Yeah.
Right.
Well, Doctor, thank you again for your time today. I appreciate you coming on to educate me and the audience, and looking forward to talking to you again.
Yes, sir, Ray. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.